In the heart of Cedarwood Estates, where the lawns were trimmed with surgical precision and mailboxes stood as sentinels of suburban order, I found myself unwittingly embroiled in an unexpected symphony of discord. My home, nestled at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, had always been my sanctuary. It was a place where I could lose myself in the gentle embrace of music, each note a whisper of solace and creativity. As a national music judge, I understood the power of sound, its ability to inspire, to heal. But it was clear that not everyone shared my perspective, especially not Karen from the Homeowners Association, who seemed to possess a unique talent for extracting grievances from even the most harmonious of situations. The first time her shadow fell across my doorstep, she arrived not with a neighborly smile, but with the clipped authority of someone accustomed to bending reality to fit her will. Her issue, she claimed, was the piano, its notes drifting through the open windows and across the meticulously aligned hedges. To me, it was the sound of life, a counterpoint to the otherwise static rhythm of neighborhood tranquility. To her, it was an intrusion, an unwanted participant in her orchestrated piece. I listened, nodded, and promised to be considerate. Her eyes, a sharp blue like winter ice, assessed me with a skepticism that seemed to file away my sincerity, as if it were just another item on her endless list of complaints. She departed with the air of someone who believed the matter settled, leaving behind a trace of her perfume, a floral scent that clung to the air like an unwanted echo. Her presence lingered long after her departure. It was in the way the light filtered through my curtains, casting shadows that seemed to dance in time with her disapproval. It was in the way the silence felt heavier, as if weighed down by unspoken judgments and the expectation of conformity. Yet, for all her insistence, I could not silence the piano. It was more than just an instrument. It was an extension of my soul, a conduit for the stories I could not tell in words. And so, I played on, each note a quiet rebellion against the encroaching monotony of regulation and routine. Days passed, punctuated by the rustling of the wind through the trees and the distant hum of lawnmowers, until her shadow returned. This time, she brought reinforcements, a clipboard clutched tightly in her hand, her armor in this suburban battleground. Her demands were more insistent, her voice a staccato rhythm of irritation and authority. Still, I remained steadfast, my resolve as strong as the oak beams that held up my home. I met her gaze with calm, a gentle reminder that not all battles are won through conflict. And when she left, dissatisfaction etched into her features, I returned to my music. Each note a subtle reminder that harmony, once disturbed, can find its way back. But as the days grew longer and her patience shorter, I sensed the brewing storm in her eyes, the kind that promised thunderously dramatic finales. She would not be content with half measures or passive resistance. Her next move would be decisive, and I suspected it would carry the weight of authority I could not ignore. Yet, there was a certain irony in knowing that even as she sought to silence me, she had become the inspiration for a new melody, one that played softly in my mind like a gentle, persistent heartbeat. The next morning, I awoke to find an envelope wedged under my front door. It was stamped with the unmistakable logo of the Homeowners Association. Inside, a letter outlined a series of violations that would have made even the most seasoned bureaucrat proud. My lawn, meticulously maintained, was suddenly too short. The shade of my blue shutters, which had always been a neighborhood favorite, was now deemed offensive to the community's aesthetic values. It didn't take a mastermind to see Karen's fingerprints all over this. She was, after all, the self-appointed keeper of our suburban utopia's unwritten codes. I could almost hear the smug satisfaction in her voice as I skimmed each sentence. Outside, the neighborhood lay under a blanket of early morning mist, the kind that clings lazily to everything it touches. But even the mist couldn't soften the edges of the day's imminent discord. Somehow, Karen had turned my passion for music into a public offense. I spent the morning wandering through my house, a fortress of memories and melodies, pondering my next move. My fingers traced the smooth ivory keys of the piano, each note a reminder of why I played. Music was my refuge, my rebellion against silence and conformity. By afternoon, the fog lifted, leaving behind a day too bright with possibilities. I could hear the familiar crunch of Karen's footsteps on the gravel path, a harbinger of trouble. It seemed she had taken to patrolling the neighborhood like a sentry on duty. Her presence was a looming shadow, a specter of absurdity that threatened to invade every aspect of life here. Rumors began to swirl like autumn leaves in a gust. I overheard snippets of conversations, the whispers that carried Karen's gospel. It wasn't just my piano playing now. It was my character under scrutiny, my dedication to the neighborhood's harmony. It was in one of those moments, standing by the window watching Karen with her clipboard as she surveyed potential infractions, that I realized how much I had been underestimated. Not by Karen, but by myself. Her attempts to bind me with rules and citations were laughable, yet they unveiled something crucial. The piano, my silent accomplice, stood in the corner, its gleaming surface reflecting a distorted image of the room. It seemed to beckon, to urge me to fight absurdity with artistry. Evening descended quietly, the sky bleeding into shades of purple and orange. I opened the window, letting the cool air rush in. From the distance, the hum of life continued, uninterrupted, unaware of the small battle playing out in this little corner of the world. I returned to the piano, each key a gateway to defiance. The notes sang out, clear and unrepentant, filling the spaces between us with something that rules and letters could never touch. Tomorrow, the world would awaken anew, and so would I. But for tonight, the music was mine alone. A quiet rebellion, a symphony against silence. The morning sun sneaks through the blinds, casting stripes across the polished surface of my grand piano. It's an instrument that holds generations of stories within its gleaming frame, a vessel for emotion, for expression. The keys wait, patient yet expectant. But today, they remain silent. Instead, I sit, not on the piano bench, but at my desk, a different kind of instrument in hand, a pen. Before me, papers are strewn, each telling a tale of conflict, of tension wrapped in the guise of a suburban facade. I am compiling evidence, the kind of methodical, quiet gathering that speaks louder than any crescendo. HOA. Karen has left her mark not just on the neighborhood, but on me. Her complaints, like a discordant melody, have become a daily intrusion. I am a national music judge, yet here, in my own home, her authority seeks to drown out my expertise. She called 911 over my piano playing, a cacophony of sirens that shattered the peace, only to find notes hanging innocently in the air. It's ironic, really. My fingers, accustomed to dancing across the keys, now tap rhythmically on the table. I document everything, every letter, every notice, meticulously cataloging her escalating obsession with control, each piece of paper a witness, each line a testament. I gather my resolve. My subtle counter is not one of confrontation, but of quiet strength. My piano sits as a silent ally, its mere presence a reminder of what she cannot take away. I have learned over years of judging that power lies not in volume, but in precision, in the well-timed pause. There's a community meeting scheduled, a predictable affair with pastries and pleasantries. I dress carefully, choosing attire that speaks of quiet confidence. As I walk into the room, Her gaze meets mine, a challenge embedded in her eyes. I move through the crowd, engaging in small talk, my demeanor calm, collected. These are my neighbors, people who hear my music as a backdrop to their lives. I seek them out, their smiles reassuring, their words of encouragement reinforcing my resolve. When the meeting begins, the usual agenda unfolds: landscaping, street repairs. But I bide my time, waiting for the moment. And then it's upon us, the floor open for new business. I stand, the room's attention shifting toward me like a spotlight on a soloist. I speak not of grievances, but of harmony, of the community's shared rhythm, disrupted only by a single jarring note. There's a ripple in the room, a nodding of heads, a collective understanding. My words are carefully chosen, crafted like a sonata meant to linger in the mind long after the music has ended. When I finish, silence envelops the room, a silence that holds weight. Eyes turn to Karen, who fidgets in her seat. Her authority, once absolute, now feels as fragile as porcelain. The meeting ends with a quiet consensus, a decision to revisit the rules, to ensure they truly reflect the community's voice. As people file out, many pause to offer words of support, a touch on the shoulder, a whispered "well done." Back home, I sit at the piano. The keys welcome my touch, and I play. The notes flow effortlessly, a melody that captures the day's events, a tapestry of tension, resolution, and the gentle reclaiming of space. Outside, the world listens. Inside, I know that the music and the power it holds will always be mine. The morning after the police visit, I woke to a peculiar stillness. It was a silence that seemed to hover, like a cloud holding its breath before a storm. My fingers itched to play, but I hesitated, listening for any sign of life from beyond my window. The air felt thick, electric. It carried the whispers of restless neighbors, rustling curtains as they peered out, awaiting the day's spectacle. The neighborhood had always been a symphony of suburban life. Lawnmowers created a rhythmic hum, punctuated by the occasional bark of a dog. Children's laughter intermingled with the distant drone of traffic. Yet today, there was an unwelcome pause. The world outside my door was rehearsing for a confrontation, and I could feel the crescendo building. Karen had become the conductor of this discordant orchestra, and she wielded her baton with the precision of a maestro. Her rant against my piano playing had struck a chord, one that resonated with those who lived in fear of disruption, of anything that rippled the calm surface of their carefully curated lives. She was the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood tranquility, and my music was an affront to her regime. I decided to play. Not for an audience, not for spite, but for the simple reason that music was my breath, my solace. As I sat at the piano, the keys cool and familiar beneath my fingertips, I surrendered to the melody. Notes flowed effortlessly, like water seeking its path over stones. Each chord was a defiant whisper against the silence that threatened to suffocate creativity. But I wasn't alone. I could sense eyes upon me, the weight of scrutiny pressing down like an unseen hand. Curtains twitched in windows, shadows shifted, my music carried out into the world, and with it, my quiet rebellion. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. It was the kind that precedes a summer storm, when the air is dense with expectation and the earth longs for release. I could feel it in the glances exchanged at the mailbox, in the conversations that ended abruptly when I appeared. Karen's discontent had planted seeds of dissent, and they were growing, tangling around everything they touched. Yet, amidst the unease, a peculiar camaraderie began to emerge. Neighbors who had once been strangers now found common ground in whispers and nods. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, the saying goes, and in the unexplored corners of our cul-de-sac, alliances were forming. A note arrived in my mailbox, unsigned but unmistakable in its purpose. It was a simple message, a single line scrawled in hurried script. Play on. A rallying cry, a beacon of solidarity. The irony was not lost on me. Karen's crusade had inadvertently sown the seeds of rebellion. I paused, the message in my hand. Around me, the neighborhood held its collective breath, waiting for my response. I returned to the piano, my resolve strengthened, and let the music speak. As my fingers danced over the keys, I imagined the sounds rising like a mist, permeating the cracks in Karen's facade. Each note was an echo of defiance, a declaration of my right to exist in harmony with my own rhythm. The storm would come, that was certain. But for now, in this moment, I played on. It began with a letter, folded neatly, slipped under her door. The paper was crisp, expensive, and smelled faintly of lavender. I imagined Karen finding it, eyes narrowing, her perfectly manicured nails slicing through the envelope. She had been relentless. Her crusade against my music, one of those absurdities that can only exist in suburbia. Now, it was my turn to compose a crescendo. The piano stood silent in the living room, its lid closed as if resting after a long performance. I found myself running fingers over the polished wood, recalling the melodies that had once filled the house, notes swirling like autumn leaves on a gusty day. Each piece played had been a moment shared with the world, a dialogue with history. Yet to Karen, it had been no more than an irritation, a call to arms in her mission to enforce silence. The legal steps were quiet, methodical. I had spoken with a lawyer who understood the nuances of neighborhood conflicts, a maestro orchestrating a symphony of justice. It seemed almost poetic, fighting her rules not with volume but with the quiet assurance of legality. A formal complaint had been filed targeting her misuse of power and her irrational vendetta, an ironic twist in the tale given her penchant for order and regulation. The Homeowners Association had its flaws, but it also had rules, and Karen had overstepped. I wondered how she would react, how her fortress of self-righteousness would withstand the scrutiny. Perhaps she'd realize her role in this opera was that of an antagonist, not the hero she imagined. The nights were eerily quiet without the piano, like a stage after the audience has departed. But within that stillness, there was an anticipation, a rest before the next movement. I had time to think, to reflect on the balance between peace and expression. Karen's world was one of control, mine, one of creation. We were locked in a dance, a minuet of wills, each step calculated. I could almost hear the music, a slow, deliberate beat underscoring our interactions. Eventually, the letter arrived. Not the one I had sent, but its reply. The Homeowners Association had decided to review the situation. My lawyer assured me this was good news, that Karen's grievances would be weighed against the rights of a community member to practice their craft. I imagined the meeting, the room filled with hushed voices and the rustle of papers. Karen, perhaps wearing one of her severe suits, would argue with the passion of someone who believed their own fiction. I, however, would not attend. My presence was not required, and there was a certain power in absence, in letting the facts speak for themselves. A few days later, the verdict arrived quietly, understated as a minor chord. The association had ruled in my favor. Karen's actions were deemed excessive, her complaints dismissed. The piano could sing again, and my hands itched to welcome it back to life. As I lifted the lid, the keys gleamed in the afternoon sun, inviting, forgiving. I settled onto the bench, letting the silence stretch one last moment before touching ivory. The opening notes were soft, a tentative greeting, then grew stronger, more confident, filling the house with sound. Outside, the world continued, unchanged and unperturbed. But within these walls, harmony had returned, a melody that no amount of complaint could silence. The music was mine again, a testament to quiet defiance. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns on the floor like a quietly shifting mosaic. My home, once a sanctuary of music, had become a battlefield of tension and unspoken words. The piano stood in the corner, silent now, its polished surface reflecting a world that had been disrupted by one woman's insistent demands. In the aftermath of the chaos, the neighborhood had fallen into a hushed equilibrium, an uneasy peace held together by the strain of collective patience. Karen's latest stunt with the police had become a whispered legend, a cautionary tale woven into the fabric of our community life. It was a story that rippled through the air, a stark reminder of the power of one person's discordant notes against the symphony of a neighborhood. The air felt different. It was as if the world had shifted, rebalanced in the wake of something monumental. My fingers ached for the keys, but instead, I found solace in the quiet observation of my surroundings. There was a grace in the small movements of life returning to normal, neighbors greeting each other with cautious smiles, children playing with the freedom of innocence, birdsong punctuating the morning air like a gentle coda. Karen's presence had become a shadow, a peripheral figure whose influence waned with each passing day. Her reign of noise complaints and unwarranted authority had cracked like old paint, revealing the vibrant community beneath. The HOA, once a tool of her tyranny, had turned inward, reflecting on its purpose and realigning with the values of unity and mutual respect.